This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
Are you negotiating custody arrangements or a financial settlement, navigating family court, or perhaps you're in the early stages of considering leaving your partner and don't know where to start, or maybe you're supporting someone else through this process? Season 2 of Tell Me Moir is for you. And today I'm putting my money where my mouth is and sharing some of my story. Welcome to Tell Me Moir, where the chats are candid, the laughs are loud, and nothing is off limits. I'm Harriet Moir, and each episode I'm sitting down with brilliant women for no filter and no nonsense chats about, well, pretty much anything. Season 2 of Tell Me Moir is a series of conversations that dig into the nitty-gritty and need-to-knows of separation, divorce, custody issues, relationship property, and family harm. Tell Me Moir dives right into the conversations we want to have but don't have time for, and the ones we don't want to have but we know we should. Are you ready for Tell Me Moir? So, to kick off Season 2 of Tell Me Moir, I want to share the story of how I went from being a strong, vibrant, successful woman, wife and mother to a broken and cortisol-riddled wreck via the end of my marriage and an extended custody issue. But also some of what I learned along the way and how I have rebuilt a new, raw and still recovering version of myself. Now, instead of just rambling, I decided to invite my wonderful, clever and insightful friend Marea Colombo into the studio to interview me. Marea has a PhD in social psychology and she's a stand-up comedian with 3 incredible solo shows under her belt. She's the artistic director of Impresaurus, and just over a year ago she became a mum. She's also kind, empathetic and super curious and super safe and the perfect person to lead this conversation. So welcome to you, my darling friend Marea.
Thank you, Harriet.
Thank you for coming. And I know you've squeezed this in. You're about to leave the country and you're trying to pack up your house.
Wouldn't miss it for
And
anything.
I'm like, oh yeah, but can you please fit in coming to unpack my trauma with me? And you're like, yeah, for sure. Pack the house, unpack trauma.
Exactly.
What can't you do?
It's what we're here for. No, I wouldn't miss it for the world. And I think it's so cool that you are willing to share this with your listeners. And so many of us have been fortunate enough to hear bits of your story through your comedy, but this is going to be a really different lens, I imagine, onto some of the stuff you've been through.
Yeah, I think so. It's really important to me, this season. Well, okay, so the podcast in general, I have tried to keep very vague at this point because I'm not quite sure which direction it's going to take. But I did know, so it was kind of like the theme, or the theme across the show would be me. I'll be talking to people, or people will be talking to me. But I did think each season it would be interesting to have a theme. And so then I thought Season 2, this is something that's really close to my heart and something that I wish, even 10 years ago when I was separating from my husband, if I'd had access to information, not just anecdotally from people sharing their stories, but from experts and industry professionals and a bit of guidance and how different that journey could have been for me. Because generally speaking, I guess people are going into this most often for the first time, and you don't really know what to expect or how to even begin. So quite often you do rely on hearsay and advice and, well, I heard so-and-so did this and so-and-so did that. And sometimes that is helpful, but yeah, just having proper industry professionals, which is what's going to happen for the rest of the season, really break down the ins and outs and bits, tips and tools and advice, I think hopefully will be really, really helpful for people. So thank you for participating.
Of course, and I'm sure it will be. And, from your wee intro, I was thinking about, you talking about being the strong, vibrant, successful woman, and I think so many people who know you would say you still fit that mould, wife and mother as well, mother as well, an incredible mother. So maybe, for some context, could you take us through the anecdote? What happened a little bit?
Yeah, it is funny because I do feel like I am still that strong and vibrant, successful woman, and probably more so, actually, even than I thought I was before. But yeah, it has been quite a journey. But there is definitely also far more of a vulnerability and a kind of a rawness and a realness and a sensitivity and a mistrust, or some of those things that make up part of that package that perhaps I blindly didn't feel before, as we all are so eternally optimistic in our youth, aren't we? So basically I was married for about 7 years, and it's really hard to pinpoint this whole thing and how it all started to fall apart and deteriorate, but essentially it was kind of like, because people often ask me, oh, what happened? Like, did he change? Was there like a radical change and all of a sudden the marriage was over kind of thing? And what I can tell you is that no, he did not change at all. I mean, perhaps from the initial kind of dating, wooing process, he was very enigmatic and charming and charismatic and all of those things, and said all the right things, all the things that I probably needed to hear. But then once we were in the throes of a life together and a mortgage and children and all of those things, that very much I slowly realised that stuff wasn't real at all. And he didn't change. He was always who he was. I guess I went through an evolution through becoming a mother, becoming a business owner, just growing myself in the music theatre that I was doing, and just where I just slowly but surely kind of woke up to the realities of the situation that I was in. And once you flick the switch. I always want to say switch the flick, but it's not. That's something else entirely.
Sure.
But once you flick the switch, like you can't unsee all the things. And I was able to see how much damage control I'd been doing already for years and years and years and years, how much of my whole sense of self and who I was had been completely paused and put on hold, because actually the reality is he didn't even particularly like that person. This is good for a podcast, a big frog in the throat, sorry. So slowly over a period of time there was this kind of evolution of discovery where I was like, oh, I'm in this situation here that's kind of not what I thought it was, and also waking up to the emotional abuse and the psychological abuse that went with all of that. And it's a really, really trite kind of analogy, but I remember we going out to our laundry that was a complete shambles and tidying it up one day and thinking, oh, that's great, I've sorted out the laundry, won't need to touch that again for the next couple of years kind of thing. And then just realising in that moment, for some reason, that was like a massive light bulb moment for me, where I was like, oh my God, this laundry is like our relationship, where I do all the fixing and the organising and the making it seem okay, and then within a week it'll be back to where it was. And I don't know why in that moment, I don't know why it was the laundry, but it was a real light bulb moment for me, where I was like, nothing's going to change, no matter how hard I love him, care for him, try and fix him, try and keep everything afloat, do all the things. This person is damaged and broken and probably unable to understand that about themselves, and is not going to change. And I had maybe already started having some therapy at that point, which was an absolute lifesaver and godsend, and she definitely helped me, come to understand that I needed to leave. Yeah.
I think there's so much about what you've said that will resonate with people, and I often think with women, because I think we've been raised to be fixers and solvers, and so I think that we always think, if I just love a little harder, if I just do this a little bit more, not even that they'll change, but I will make it work.
Yeah.
And I think that concept is one that takes a really long time to
unpack. Yeah. Also, that if I love them hard enough and do all the things, they will love me back.
Oh,
that was a big
totally.
thing for me.
And there's security in units, and I
Yeah.
think that's something that we don't often talk about. Like we are, we can be strong, independent women and also live in a world that benefits from being in dyads and a family
Absolutely.
unit.
Yeah.
So when you're preparing to leave that, you're not just leaving that person, but also almost this like third person you've created together.
100%. And I think that's the thing too. The stakes become so much higher for leaving once you also then throw in a house, a mortgage, whatever, children. It's like people, I imagine, stay much longer than they should or much longer than is healthy, or, people just say, oh, why didn't she just leave? It's not that easy. The guilt involved with leaving, even when you know it's the right thing to do, it's unspeakable.
And
It's
in a small
horrendous.
town as well.
Yes.
We're not in some big city where you might not run into this person
Exactly.
or, your friendships are intertwined. There's a lot to unravel.
So much. Families, like
Totally.
whether your families are on board with the decision or not, and all of those complexities. Like it's really, but I actually ultimately though, like I used to look at the girls and think, oh my God, how could I possibly break up the family unit and leave the family home? Like how could I do that to them? And then it got to the point where in the end I was like, oh no, I have to do this for them because I can't let this be the example of a relationship for them.
Yeah.
So the shift from going, I can't break up because of them, to being like, oh no, I need to do this for them.
Totally.
Like, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And that probably takes us to kind of my next question of was there one kind of ultimate moment that you were like, that's it?
It was a bit of it was definitely a process. So there were some things that had happened. There was increasing kind of harm and volatileness, like incidences like my brand new phone being thrown into oncoming traffic, my brand new phone without insurance, I should add, being thrown into oncoming traffic and being banned from having a phone or communication with my family. There were like a number of quite significant incidences that while I was on the fence and we were doing couples counselling to really try and get to the bottom of everything and trying to make it work, I think just accumulatively it just became, I don't think there was one defining incident, but there were just enough things accumulatively with a network of people around me who were helping me have perspective about what was happening, because you're also in your own little echo chamber and you want to find all the ways to justify the behaviour is okay, because the idea of leaving is so scary. So having people around you to be like, hey, that's not normal and that's not okay was really, really important, especially because, as you say, we're such, often raised to be such people pleasers and sort of keep fixes and make it workers that you kind of can push through quite a lot before you have to, and then the stakes are that much higher. So having people around me to be like, yep, that is not okay. And by that stage, there was a therapist involved as well, reminding me of these things, and I had probably started to seek some legal advice and keep a record of things so that I could also have them saying, yep, this is not really good, and that to the point that the advice I was getting from my therapist was to talk to the police about how to leave and all of those things. And by the time you get to that point, I think you just can't pretend anymore, like when your therapist is telling you need to go and see the police to work out how to leave safely. That's,
Yeah. A professional turning to you and saying, there's nothing really to work through here except you've got to leave is a pretty big indicator.
And it is a lot to get your head around when you are this strong, vibrant, amazing, independent woman. Like, how could I possibly be in a domestic abuse situation? Like, how could that possibly be me? Like, that's not real. I'm like, I'd be telling everyone to leave those relationships, So it was quite kind of, I think humbling. I don't know if humbling's the right word, but quite kind of confronting. But But it is that pot thing, isn't it? It's the frog in the pot that slowly boils. Like, it's not until much later when I've looked back at things, and sometimes I look back at things now and I just think, oh my God, I can't believe I accepted that for so long. Yeah, it's really full on to think about. And I think about what that young woman at about 27 who met this person and why any of that was acceptable to her. Like, it's quite interesting to peel back all the layers and think about that. But we are sold this story about the unit as being the epitome of success, and your biological clock starts ticking, and all of those things combined, I probably just threw myself at the first person who showed an interest, and then he probably saw that weakness and vulnerability and went for it, kind of thing. Empaths and narcissists actually work very, very well together, and I remember my therapist telling me that the reason we lasted as well as we and as long as we did probably was the fact that I was so far down the empathy spectrum and he was so high up the narcissist spectrum that it actually functioned. Yeah, for quite a long time.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing, kind of. Shocking.
I mean, great to know now.
Great to know.
Yeah.
You can do amazing things. So at the moment that you realised that you were going to leave, were there things that you prepared for? Because I think, there must have taken a lot of courage, but also a lot of planning. Because if you've been in an abuse situation and, leaving safely seems like a priority as well.
Yeah, so I did go to the police for some advice, and it was one of those situations where you're sitting in there going, I can't believe I'm here. And it didn't feel like they took what I had to say particularly seriously. Or like, I guess maybe they weren't used to people coming in and talking about that type of abuse. I don't know. I mean, there was never physical abuse, although sometimes at times I did kind of wish that he would, so that it would make it easy. Seems easier to justify in the world somehow. But there was physically threatening behaviour. So never lay a punch, but did spit in my face, throw things at me, and was angry and physically aggressive. But as I say, you sit there saying, oh, my husband's been a bit mean to me and I want that on police record. It's sort of, I don't know, but I think that's changing from what I understand, like this whole coercive control thing that's come into the courts recently and being viewed as a crime and being taken much more seriously, although it is difficult to prove. That's the other thing about it. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all evolves over the coming years, because obviously judges and things aren't necessarily trained in that area. It's a whole new kind of, I'm not an expert, I can't talk about it, but obviously it's great, but it's just the beginning, I think. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I keep getting distracted. What was the question?
No, I mean, I think
rambling.
It's kind of like, how did you prepare and what was your plan? Really?
Yeah. Okay, so the police basically just told me to get a couple of the things they said was to get all the important documents out of the house in case I didn't have access back into the house after I left. So just make sure I had the kids' birth certificates, passports, my bits and pieces, just put them in a bag one day and make sure they're just somewhere else. She also advised me not to tell him in private. The advice was to tell him in a public space, because we talked about other stuff that we talked about in private and how he had reacted. And so her advice was to tell him in a public space, but I actually didn't take that advice. I felt a bit mean doing that. So I did tell him, in the end I actually didn't have to tell him. I was planning to tell him. I'd lined up a place to stay that I knew that we'd be able to stay for about 6 weeks. That was room enough for the girls and I. My lawyer told me to make sure there was somewhere appropriate and comfortable for the girls to sleep, because if custody goes bad and stuff, there's abandonment issues in play, that could be contested, and you need to show that there's somewhere for your kids to go that's suitable for them. So I had that lined up. Family had given me some money because that's another thing. We were pretty broke anyway, but so my ability to like squirrel aside money, and that was a big thing, like slowing down the leaving. I was like, what will I do? I know that in 6 months' time I'll be sorted, but what would I do for money for 6 months in between? So money from some family, but I actually, a bit of a spanner in the works, I actually I'd planned, like, when I was going to leave, I sort of wanted to time it for when the kids were back at school and stuff, but I actually got pregnant before that, and that obviously threw a massive spanner in the works. And I don't do pregnancy very well for the first 16 weeks or so, just really vomiting and disgusting. And I think back to your initial earlier question, like, was there a deciding factor? I think that perhaps, even though I was already pretty sure I was going, that may have been the thing that kind of clinched the deal, because I desperately ummed and ahed about what the best decision was with this baby, and ultimately, because I was feeling so wretched and going through this situation where I was needing to separate myself from this person as much as feasibly possible, plus I needed to give everything I had to the 2 girls that I already had, I made the decision that I thought I would not want to progress with the pregnancy. But there was no conversation entered into with him. He was like, well, no, absolutely not. It was a very clinical decision for him. And that for me was like, I don't understand how it can be like that. And he didn't know I was leaving at that point. So that was a kind of a deciding factor for me. And then I had the date planned, and I was supposed to have the termination 1 week, and then I was going to give myself a week to recover and then leave the following weekend. And at that stage, I wasn't able to communicate with my family. I didn't have a phone, and my family was communicating through my best friend, and she had forwarded an email to me that I'd read from my mum that I'd then put in my trash. And I remember lying in bed about a week before I was due to have the termination and hearing his footsteps down the hallway, and just knowing that something was up, and him coming in and saying that he'd found the email in my trash and that I was leaving, and how dare you, and all of that. And then him saying, and I was planning to be really nice to you on Friday, which was the day of the termination. So just that, like that he had to diarise. Yeah. To be nice.
It's good to book it in.
Yeah.
Because you have to use all your energy to help someone else going through something traumatic.
Yeah, that involves you as well.
Absolutely.
That you've played a significant role in.
Some would say 50%.
Yeah,
indeed.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this moment of leaving was complicated by a host of factors.
Yeah.
And the plan didn't really go to plan in some ways.
No, it didn't in the end.
And there's so much in there, right? That lack of security, even from your partner, going through the trash of your email, really speaks volumes to how much control and coercion was going on. I don't even look in the trash of my own email.
I know. Like, what are we putting in the trash too? Like I suppose that's the perfect place to look, really. Like, if you are trying to, here's a word of advice, if you are trying to snoop around your partner's life, look in their trash, because that's probably where things are. I don't know. It's more to the point. Who thinks to empty the trash? You think by taking it out of your inbox into the trash, in your mind you're like, I've emptied the, like I've done the thing. Yeah, but it does pay to delete your trash.
You got to take the red bin out to the road. That's where it happens. So he finds out that you are leaving in advance of this, and what is the timeline there?
So I had the termination as planned, sort of a week after that incident. Incredibly difficult week in the household. We had planned that we would tell the children together. So do the termination first, a bit of recovery, and then perhaps sometime during that next week we would tell the children together. But he couldn't help himself one morning. By the way, I just got dropped off at the termination, and then my dad took me home.
Nice.
And he didn't make me a cup of tea or food or anything. Nothing.
There are so many words that we can't say on air about this.
Nothing.
But, yeah.
Which was similar to the process after giving birth as well, I have to say. But so there you go. Like,
consistent.
Did he change? Consistent. Nothing if not consistent. So yeah. But he couldn't help himself one morning before school, bundling the kids up. He lost his rag about it and just blurted out to the kids that mum's leaving, and, you know, just in a fit of anger. And so then you've got the teary 5-year-old and the 3-year-old who's confused. And every time with her home-based carer, every time they drove through the octagon, my 3-year-old would say fuck in the car. And this letter came home from the home-based carer because there'd been a massive blow up between us one day in the octagon, and he'd yelled at me and sworn at me and said fuck a number of times. And so then, then she would say, so this letter came home from the home-based carer saying, unfortunately, your 3-year-old keeps saying fuck every time we drive through the octagon. Anyway, you can laugh now, but she still says fuck, by the way. Oh, I'm not supposed to say fuck. Oh my gosh. Anyway, it was anecdotal. Anyway, so we blurted it all out, and that was that. And then a couple of days later, I left, and I took the kids with me because I was told that was important. Yeah, and
Yeah, well, we'll ask some more questions about this after a short ad break.
Thank you.
Going through a separation? You don't have to face it alone. Rochelle Crossman is a specialist family law barrister, helping clients move forward with clarity and care. She focuses on collaborative resolution of the issues that arise from separation, from relationship property division to care arrangements for children, keeping matters respectful and out of court where possible. But when court is required, she's there to advocate strongly. Find a better path forward. Find out more at rochellecrossman.co.nz.
Thank you so much to Rochelle Crossman for sponsoring Season 2 of Tell Me Moir. We're delighted to have her collaborating on this season, which will hopefully be really, really helpful and informative for people. Back to you, Marea.
Amazing. So you've given us some amazing and, you know, very honest background about kind of what led you to decide that you were going to leave and take the kids with you as well. So I guess from that point, my question is, for those of us who either are going through or haven't gone through it, what happens there? What are the arrangements that you had to do?
With the kids.
With the kids,
yeah. So I guess it's different for everyone. And when you say I took the kids, it was not like taking the kids and saying they're coming with me and not with you kind of thing. It was like, I think it would be a really good idea if the kids came with me for the first few nights, because so they can see where I'm going and see that I'm okay and see where I'm going to be and see where their little room's going to be. And I managed to persuade him to understand that was a good idea. And that was, as I said, on the advice from the lawyer, just taking your kids with you if you can, or but that's not necessarily legal advice. I'm just saying I'm pretty sure that's what I was told. Or advised was a good idea. So then as far as he was concerned, it was going to be 50-50, no matter what. I guess because of the age of the kids, that might not have been my ideal or what I would have thought would have been in the best interest of the children at that age. However, I understood very clearly that that's how the law sees it, unless there's good reason why not. And so I kind of knew that was going to be the case. And I was also advised by a couple of people that chances are he wasn't going to cope very well with the 50-50 stuff on his own, because we lived a little bit out of town as well. So, it's a big trek at the end of the day, and you've got tired and hungry kids and all of that stuff. So, and that kind of was starting to be true pretty quickly. Within a couple of weeks, I was sort of saying, oh, well, perhaps if they just stayed here an extra night or whatever. Not genuinely not out of in a manipulative way, genuinely out of like what's in the best interests for the kids. And he was grateful for the help. But then he met someone pretty quickly and had them moved in with her within about 10 weeks of us separating. And she then picked up where he wasn't able to, and she managed the children really well, for which I'm actually eternally grateful. She took really, really good care of the kids, and they were fond of her, and I will always be grateful to her for that. Yeah.
So, when we think of separation and kind of obviously working with your co-parent, you actually had a third kind of parent in the mix quite early on in some ways, or a third adult.
Yes, and let's be really clear here. I did not know anything about her until several months down the track was the first time I met her. So you're in this situation where there's a complete stranger looking after your children, which is absolutely bizarre and I think should be illegal. But it's crazy. Like, I was prepared to do 50-50, but I didn't see it on the dance card that someone else was going to be effectively raising my children half the time, someone who I'd never met and knew nothing about. It's wild. But there's nothing you can do. If your ex-partner isn't able to see that, isn't willing to have conversations about that, is not willing to appreciate where you're coming from, there is nothing you can do about it. You just have to parent consistently, love your kids, be there, and as I say, fortunately, I feel like they were being well looked after by this person, and in some ways better than if they'd just been with their dad. So I was very grateful for that. Now, that relationship didn't lasted a couple of years, I know, before she cottoned on to what was going on, and we had been kept quite distanced from each other, but we actually found out each other after that relationship broke up and were able to share some stories.
A support group.
Yeah, exactly. And then very quickly again, within about 8 weeks, he had moved them in with someone else new again.
And the cycle
continues. And that person is his current wife, and he has two more. They have more children, and that's now been quite a few years that they've been together. So, but yes, it was, really challenging. And by that stage, I think the kids were starting to push back a little bit about it. Not necessarily consciously, but behaviourally, I think there might have been signs that they were a bit stressed by all of that, especially because at the end of that previous relationship, they didn't get the chance to say goodbye. And that was really hard for them, even though they couldn't have articulated it. I think that's not really very fair.
Yeah, and I think, children are far more perceptive than we give them credit for. And I think that they will have known that there were tensions in there, and so they're going to react to those things as well.
For sure.
So how long did you continue doing 50-50 for?
Yeah, so it was about 5 years we did 50-50. Our original, and this was an agreement we came to together, and we were doing like a 3-3-4-4 thing. So he'd do 3 days, I'd do 3 days, 4 days, 4 days, 3 days. So, and that worked in principle, but what we were finding with that arrangement was that the pickups and drop-offs were happening on the weekends. So it was a Sunday that would swap over. And our kids didn't want to go quite a lot of the time. And there'd be a lot of kicking and screaming and tantrums and big tears and thumping and really resisting going. And that was really difficult for everyone. It was yucky. It was horrible. But particularly the kids. It's like, you're having to tell them that they have to go, even though they're begging you not to go.
And can I just ask here, because, I think obviously I know your kids and they're amazing, and I think you are just such an incredible mum and always talk about, how hard it was. But I just want to investigate a little bit for you. You also have known this person, probably don't have a lot of trust in this man, and you have to send your kids who are kicking and screaming to him. How was that for you?
I think this is a line that people have to tread very carefully, actually, in this whole process. It's like, because the kids were coming and telling me that things were happening that I knew to be true, because I had experienced those things myself, or things like that. It's different if your kids start coming and telling you things that are really out of character and unusual, and that would be a different approach that you'd have to take again, I think, because you'd be a bit more like, or maybe you'd be a bit more likely to be like, well, maybe Dad's just having a bad day, or maybe they're stressed, or, but so it's this really delicate line that you have to tread, where you don't want to gaslight your children out of their lived experiences, but you're beholden to a law that tells you have to send them back to that place. So things were becoming increasingly volatile and at home for them at their father's house after about 5 years after we had separated. So this is about, we've been doing 50-50 for about 5 years. And at one point during that time, we went to a mediator, by the way, which was really helpful because it helped us come up with a plan, which was 5225, which enabled us to do the handovers on school days instead of weekends, and that made a really big difference to the handover. Didn't change obviously what was happening at home, but it did help with the handover, so there was less stress involved with that. But yeah, the kids were reporting back a number of things that were becoming increasingly difficult for me to ignore, in terms of just going, oh, well, there's not much I can do about it, kind of thing, to the point that I did actually go and report a couple of things along the way to the police. Anyway, so yeah, you have to tread this incredibly delicate line where you know that you're bound by this law to send them back, but you don't want to gaslight them out of their feelings and their truth and what's happening. And when you know and you feel those things in your own bones because you've experienced them yourself, it's really hard. It's kind of like gaslighting yourself as well. So that's really, and I will enjoy talking to a psychologist in a couple of episodes about that whole particular dynamic. I think it'll be really interesting to hear what she has to say, because it is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
And you're trying not to speak ill of their other parent and all of those things. And it's really, I sometimes would talk about the behaviours, not the person, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
As a way to try and navigate around it. Be like, yeah, that I can see how that behaviour would be upsetting for you, or something like that, so that you're kind of validating what they've experienced without saying something really negative about their dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite
tricky.
Yeah, quite tricky, and I think it's a good thing for people to hear, because those are the tense parts, and you have to hold that.
Yeah, you do.
As the mum.
It's very stressful.
So I obviously know that you do no longer have a 50-50 arrangement.
No, I have full custody of the girls now, so yeah, they live with me full time. Yeah.
Are you able to talk about what moved it from 50-50 to full time?
There was one incident in particular where the children were at their dad's place. I was in Wellington for the weekend. The kids, there was a dispute between their dad and his partner that was significant enough for the children to run to the neighbours with their baby sister. And the neighbour called me in Wellington, and also called the police. And I had to fly back in a hurry. And yeah, there's a whole lot that I'm not able to actually disclose around all of that. But in short, well, not in short, in long, yeah, I now have full custody of the kids. Well, when I say full custody, I have the kids are mine, in my care all the time. Yeah, and that is primarily driven by the children. I should say. So there's stuff that I'm not able to talk about, but I'm hoping that throughout the season, and just, there'll be stuff that industry professionals can shed light on that I possibly can't, like in terms of processes and things like that. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think it really goes to speak how it's hard to communicate about some of these things and get the information out there.
Yes,
because these processes are private and legal, and so it creates a tension. What I think is great about this podcast is it's able to use professionals to talk about what ifs.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Absolutely. It is essentially a protection of the children to not talk about it, which I understand, and I think that's really important and great, actually. Exactly, the what ifs, because this is the thing as well. This is the hard thing about a podcast like this or a topic like this, is that there are so many variables for every single person going through it. So just a few hypotheticals and a few, things out there will be really, really useful, I hope.
And so if we fast forward here, so we've had kind of a huge, long, drawn-out process of whatever it is. Actually, let's pause for a wee ad and then we'll come back to it.
Going through a separation? You don't have to face it alone. Rochelle Crossman is a specialist family law barrister, helping clients move forward with clarity and care. She focuses on collaborative resolution of the issues that arise from separation, from relationship property division to care arrangements for children, keeping matters respectful and out of court where possible. But when court is required, she's there to advocate strongly. Find a better path forward. Find out more at rochellecrossman.co.nz.
Welcome back. Thanks. That was just a wee word from our sponsors of this season, Rochelle Crossman, family lawyer, and we're so grateful to Rochelle for her support of the season and the kaupapa that we're trying to share.
And kind of bringing it back there, so I guess one of the questions I have towards the end is you've had this long process and it's clearly had some long-term effects. So what would you say for you, what are some of the things you feel reflecting on it now, sharing about it? How's it impacted you?
In the long term, physically, financially, emotionally, all of the things. Yeah, it's been a really, really long journey. And I would say we found some relative kind of equilibrium in the last 3 years. The girls and I, we're just sort of doing our thing now, and it's quite apparent that they aren't actively seeking a relationship with their father at all, and so there's a relative amount of calm that goes with that, sort of those kind of solid decisions and stuff. So that's we're like pretty good, but the implications of the last 10 years are quite far-reaching. So financially, of course, like separation is difficult for everyone who's, you're always worse off, right? So half of nothing is even less than nothing, really. And that's what our situation was. And we've got an episode that will deep into the financial settlement stuff, the relationship property stuff. So that's going to be one to listen out for if that's where you're at with everything. Also, there hasn't, until recently, I was going to say there hasn't been any child support paid in the time that I've had the kids full time, but that is now not true. There has been some child support paid recently, so I will give credit where credit is due. But but for 5 years there hasn't been, because I've had the kids full time now for 5 years, and that is also like obviously the kids missing out in the now, but that also has an impact on my financial future, because of my inability to save or plan for my future, I should say, because every cent goes towards the kids right now. So plus, it's just nasty. But yeah, physically, I now have developed this voice disorder, which kind of interestingly started to happen just within a few months of everything settling down. It's quite incredible how the body holds on and holds on and holds on, and then suddenly I noticed my voice was just doing weird stuff and I couldn't quite get it right, and spent months just sort of thinking, oh, it'll come right. But then eventually I started to get some investigations done and had speech therapy and all that sort of thing. And ultimately we found out I've got something called spasmodic dysphonia, which is really, really rare, and it's basically for life. And essentially a neurological pathway has broken from the brain to the voice box. So the message to the vocal cords about how to function has been interrupted. So that's wild. I do have Botox now, injections every 3 months for that, and remarkably and very gratefully it is working really well. But as you can hear, I'm kind of coming to the end of a 3-month cycle at the moment, so my voice is not that fat flash right now. And I recently got a type 1 diabetes diagnosis, which is an autoimmune disorder, and you have to have the gene in the first place, but often stress or ongoing stress and trauma can trigger an event that then brings on something like type 1 diabetes or other things, but for me it's the diabetes. So like there's so many things that if I knew then what I know now about the processes and how to look after yourself. Like I just drank coffee and Prosecco and didn't really eat properly and didn't exercise for a solid decade really.
Yeah.
Because I was just living on edge. And it's really hard to say, but you've got to take care of yourself in those situations, like self-care. But you're like, you're battling for your life.
Totally.
And like, I find the whole idea of self-care quite a privileged notion. Like, I don't have money for massages. I had young children. I couldn't go out for a walk. And when the kids were with their dad, I needed to just curl up in a heap.
Yeah.
And in the fetal position and like sleep.
When you're holding all that in front of your kids, you're trying to be a perfect mum.
Yeah.
And then whenever you have a moment to kind of just feel those things, who sits there and goes, do you know what I'd like to do? Have a balanced meal and go for a run.
No thanks.
No thanks.
No thanks. KFC bucket.
Yeah.
And a polar fleece dressing gown. Yeah, that's right.
But I think what you bring up is like a really important point for people to hear, that there are ongoing consequences to this level of stress. And so hopefully, through people listening to the guests who are going to come on the podcast this season, it obviously won't relieve the whole stress, but maybe relieve the knowledge gap, which is a huge portion.
Huge, because, you're learning on the job. So often, like you're learning by making mistakes as well, and that those mistakes have implications, and it's really stressful, all of it. And so to have a little bit of insight, and perhaps, like we all talk about looking after ourselves, and perhaps there might be other ways that are less considerable in which we can take care of ourselves through a process like that. Like, I know in terms of the separation process and our financial settlement, we were trying to settle, as I say, half of nothing. And I'm such an emotional person. I was like using my lawyer to tell all the drama too, kind of thing. And that probably cost me thousands of dollars that it didn't need to. I should have been telling that to somebody else, and just learning how to be really clear and concise and succinct and consistent with her. And I've heard lots of messaging about that, in terms of family court processes and stuff as well. People are like, oh, you need to be really clear and concise and consistent and calm kind of thing, and save the emotional dumping and the emotional downloads for your friends, not your lawyer, because that's going to cost you a lot of money.
Yeah, I think whenever you have scenarios like this, it's like the reality of the situation is so stressful, and then the way you are ideally expected to behave is as if the stress is not happening.
Yeah.
And so you have to find, and that builds tension between the two.
Absolutely.
And so I guess for me, what were some things you did to the best of your ability, kind of relieve that tension in the time with friends, family? Like
just Prosecco.
Just Prosecco.
A lot of Prosecco, yeah. Just talking. I'm a talker. And I was incredibly lucky to have a very amazing support network of friends and family who don't live here, but I was able to talk to over the years, and they've all been amazing. But in particular, a really incredible community of people here who wrapped around the children as well in a big way, like they've been my children's family here, and it absolutely takes a village. Like, in terms of, when it was 50-50, it wasn't quite as bad, but now that it's full time and with lots of my work, which is night times and evenings and weekends and stuff, like even just having people there for the girls in that way has been so amazing. My dad was a really, really huge help for a long time till he passed away a few years ago. Just really, I'm a talker, so being able to talk through stuff was really, really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that makes total sense. I guess I know that we're coming close to the end, but if you could if someone listening right now is going through a similar situation and there's something I haven't covered that you just really would like to tell them so they know, what would that be?
I think if you're not sure about leaving, or, if you're on the cusp of leaving something that's not even problematic. Maybe it's just a relationship that's come to an end, and you're running all the possible scenarios in your head of what could happen or what might happen and what things might look like on the other side. The reality is you just don't know until you're doing it, and some of the most unexpected things will happen. And but having a really great support network around you of people who are able to just hold you, not necessarily push you into decisions or force their opinions on you, but just hold space for you wherever you're at in your journey. I think that's really, really important. But also, I think seeking advice, seeking legal advice. If you're in a potentially dangerous situation, make a call to Women's Refuge, ask some questions, just that they will help you, and they'll help you see things or think about things in ways that you may never have thought of as well, and they'll just really help you get perspective about your situation and your needs.
Yeah. And I think one of the big themes that seems to be coming up from what you say is just reminding people that they matter, their experiences matter.
Yes.
And what they go through matters.
Yes.
And people are willing to listen to it.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be a horrific situation to be heard and to be justified in saying, this isn't working for me.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes relationships just end. Sometimes they do. And you may have tried all the things, and sometimes they just come to an end, and that's actually okay. But yeah, like getting help to navigate that as well. So in those kind of situations, I'd be like, go and get a third party counsellor to help you work out how you make that happen. I think, there's, and the other thing I'd want people to know is that no matter how bleak and desperate things look, like I didn't have a home, no money to buy a home, barely enough money to just a couple of $1,000s that was given to me by family to kind of get by. But I did the big leap, and it's not been easy. I still don't have any money, but there is kind of hope, and you can't actually imagine possibly even how good life can be on the other side. And I'm talking 10 years, 11 years now since I left. And I'd say the last 3 years have really felt like we've landed, and I feel much more my old self again. And I have hope and optimism, and I'm not battling kind of physical triggers and stuff every day like I used to. So it might take a really long time, but there is a life for you on the other side of that relationship if that's what needs to happen.
That's amazing. Well, I think people are going to be very lucky to keep hearing throughout this season.
Thank you so much, Marea, for coming in today and interviewing silly old me. So if you want to know more about Marea, she's just an incredibly fascinating, brilliant woman. You can follow the Impressoris page, but also Late Bloomers. That's her production company for the shows that she does with Bronwyn Wallace, and they're a powerhouse duo, and we love them, and we're so lucky to have Marea in Dunedin and Bronwyn, who was in Dunedin. So, check out Late Bloomers. You've been listening to Marea Colombo in conversation with Harriet Moir on episode 1 of season 2 of Tell Me Moir. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to Tell Me Moir, where the conversations with women are brave, bold, and occasionally make you clutch your pearls in a good way. Heard something that made you gasp, giggle, or immediately text your group chat? Don't worry, we've got you. You can replay this episode or dive into more colourful conversations at oar.org.nz or find us on your favourite podcast platform. For more information about my shows and shenanigans, follow me on Instagram and Facebook, Harriet Moir Entertainer MC. And thanks to Rochelle Crossman, family lawyer, for her tremendous support of season 2. Now, go on, hit subscribe. You know you want to.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.